Well, hey, in the garage with me today is my good buddy Matt Agosta from Steele Rubber Company. Matt, great to see you, man.
Good to see you too, Dennis.
Well, you know, we always talk about black squishy stuff when you're here. But we're going to talk today a little bit about the kind of the evolution of weather stripping in the automotive industry.
Yeah.
It started out, because back in the day, in the earliest days, they didn't have weather stripping.
No, they didn't.
It was just metal.
Right. You know, most of the car makes started in the in the turn of the century, basically. And they just used little bumpers for closing their door and stuff, but nobody seemed to be too concerned about all the rain coming in and wrecking your.
But then it started coming in and wrecking your stuff, and they figured they had to do something. So in the early days, it was just gluing stuff on in a few places, right?
They first started with trying to hold the rubber on with a track, and in the early 30s. By the late 30s, they were starting to glue the rubber on.
And by that time, they were also going all the way around the door.
Right. But as we went through the 40s into the 50s, they started using a metal clip that was extruded into the rubber.
But that
was on if you pick out a 1955 Chevy, an early one, you'll see the door weather strip had little metal clips every 4 inches.
But if this rubber, which was open cell at that time, was kind of like a sponge, that would rust those babies out.
And that's exactly what it did.
Ah.
So by the late 50s, they went into a nylon clip.
Something like this.
Like this. So they got away from the metal being inside that part.
Now, in a stripping like that, you don't even glue that, right? I mean, that's just push point.
That's just pushed in, and it's just held on just by the clips.
Now, they also, started getting real fancy at the ends of these, because it used to just terminate and it was rubber and that was about it. Now there's these, gap-filling, different type of rubber molded on, but that made it even more complex for you guys.
It did. As they designed the cars and had bigger gaps up around, especially around the striker and the upper hinge section, then it was cheaper to make a mold to fill that than it was to change the metal design so that everything fit tight. If they didn't learn the lessons with the clips, they started putting steel inside the ends to hold it. Well, same problem. They would rust and it would just corrode apart. So we changed that by making the metal pieces out of brass.
And I could feel a metal chunk in here, and that's going to fit in the right place, and it's not going to.
It's not going to corrode, and brass adheres better to the rubber.
This is kind of an interesting one, though.
Now we make these for our street rodder friends and
a universal,
and people that want to use universal, where it's just peel and stick. In fact, that's what we call it, our peel and stick.
Now we did trunk weather stripping on an episode, I don't know, a couple years ago, and here's a couple. This one is the trunk is glued. But not with much glue. This, for instance, is one of the earlier ones, right?
That's an earlier one. You would glue that like you'd glue the door weather strip.
And you glue, I guess, the flat side, and then that's your seal side.
Right.
Right? Now this guy is a different shape.
Right. Now that...
Actually, that goes like this, right?
And this, exactly. And this in here fits inside of a track. And the track holds the rubber. So you just push it in place, and it's held. Now, we use a tiny bit of glue in the track and push it in place, just to hold it, especially around the corners where it takes a little more stress.
But not much. And these are also sized correctly, so your trunk's going to close. It's not going to bulge. It's not going to be too thin. You're going to keep the weather out, just like the door strip. Made from original molds. Your molds are made from original rubber, and you got the right stuff.
Exactly.
So it's now really easy for the restore. It's just a little tougher for you, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, we used to just extrude the rubber, and that was nice and simple.
But
now we have now we have to,
Well,
we have to go through a lot of steps.
Thank you for that, and for keeping the weather out and good stuff in.
Well, you're welcome.
You're welcome. Well, hey, if you want to learn anything more about this great Steele Rubber product, door weather stripping, trunk weather stripping, or anything else that gets weather stripping in the car, log on to myclassiccar.com.
AutoGeek.net. We are car care.